and we're picking back up on God Will Work With You But Not For You, A Living Philosophy by Russle. Chapter 11, or no, Chapter 9, Roman numerals. Application of universal oneness. The standard of a civilization is the mean of its average level of its constructive and destructive thinking. It becomes what it thinks, even as one man becomes what he thinks. The world of man is still far from knowing that every thought and action of every man reaches through and affects the thoughts of every other man. Every good thought is like a drop of water added to the ocean level, and every bad thought lowers its level. A war-making, class-dividing, race-hating civilization is not the product of one man. It is the product of all men. No one man may say, I am good, therefore I did not make it. He lives in it and profits by its conquests or suffers its penalties. These are the lessons which are ahead of us, awaiting our knowledge, our knowing. The more we can comprehend the oneness of our universe, the more speedily we may learn the lessons which will gradually raise the whole level of our civilization above the present low-level, man-killing, God-fearing, barbarian age. As that level slowly rises, peace and happiness will come to man in the measure of his spiritual awakening. It has often been said, as a man thinks, so he becomes. Likewise, the world becomes what all men think. Therein lies the answer to our present low-level world which man-thinking has created, our man-against-man world today. To make a better world, each man must change his thinking by raising its constructive level. No man can do this beyond the level of his own knowledge. He must have more knowledge of the oneness of all mankind and the oneness of all the universe. He must learn to think universally, not separately. When a man knows that he is not a separate unit of mankind, but is electrically connected in mind and body with all other men, he will begin to act differently toward men. When he knows that he is not walking among men but through men who are actually extended from him and he from them, he cannot help thinking differently toward them. Neither could his thoughts be other than those of universal brotherhood. Children should be taught at a very early age that whatever they do to another, they are doing to themselves. That is the very first principle which to found their morality and character. If they are made to they hurt themselves when they hurt another physically or by unkind words, and are made to know it as a part of natural law, that knowledge will become habitual with them. As a twig is bent, so is the tree inclined. Hitler said, "Give me a generation of children, and I will give you another world of men who will be like me." The habit of thinking in patterns becomes traditional, then automatic. Mankind is more or less a mass of automatons. It thinks in the patterns of world traditions. You should know and you should see it. You should know and you should see to it that your children know the invisible universe is even more than ours. You should teach them how the invisible universe controls their every moment, governs their every action, blesses them for every expression of love which they give out of themselves, and hurts them for every hurtful thing they do. If the new generation is giving that kind of dynamic knowledge, the whole world standard of civilization will quickly rise, because man's actions toward men will change as the patterns of his thinking change. Many mothers now tell children that God knows everything they do, in hope that they will be deterred from wrong actions. That is too abstract and too indefinite for the average child, and therefore meaningless. Nothing could so permanently hurt a child as to tell him that God will punish him if he does wrong. Children should be taught that they will punish themselves. Parents should talk to their children more dynamically and realistically about God. Teaching them to pray at bedtime can be as harmful as it is good, for many children think of it as a time to ask God for what they want without giving anything in exchange for it. The Santa Claus conception of God is not a good way to think of him. A woman once told me of a long list of things her child asked God for, which she herself brought for the child. "Don't you think it is cute?" she asked of me. "I think it is tragic, not cute," I replied, "for it teaches the child to expect things to be given to her without effort on her part. It does not convey to her the feeling that she must re-give anything for her gifts. She should be taught to be worthy of every gift she receives. Our students' children are brought up with a feeling of familiarity with the God presence. They are not taught to pray at prescribed times, but are taught to talk to God at all times when His help is needed to guide them. To talk to God has the connotation of a conference or a communion, whereas praying to God has the connotation of asking for some favor. One of our students' children came running to her, crying lustily and seeking the usual comfort with which mothers mistakenly give on such occasion. The little girl had been playing with her sister, and a quarrel developed. "Why do you come to me?" her mother asked. "God was there. He knows about it, and I do not. Why not talk to God about it?" The child cuddled up in a big chair and was quiet for some time. Then she ran to her mother, looking quite happy. "Well, what did God say about it?" the mother asked. "He told me to go kiss Susie," the child replied. That way of telling children to talk with God at all times gives them a friendly feeling of dependence upon God instead of the feeling of a far distant God who exists only to grant the favors asked of him. They should be taught that they are either working with God or against him. They should be shown by a continuous demonstration how God works with them to bring food up from the ground for them to eat. How all things they like or arrange or how all things they like, oranges, nuts, carrots, rice, and all things else they need and like, are given to them only because God is working with man and man with God to produce them. They should be informed of the matter. They should be informed of the matter in which God works with all of his birds, animals, insects, fishes, and reptiles, to teach them the way of survival through instinct. They should learn how God protects them through camouflage of their bodies, which makes them more difficult to see. They should be taught the wonder of how God guides them in the choice of materials they need for comfort, and of their engineering principles for constructing nests, spiderwebs, dams, anthills, honeycombs, and hundreds of other forms, which are repeatedly done in every succeeding generation without being taught by parents. It should be equally demonstrated that these creatures all work with God as he works with them. They work to build their nests and other things as God directs them to do, otherwise they would perish. They do not ask God to do it for them, as many people do. They work with him constantly, as all things in nature do. That is the great principle to impress upon children. For too many lives are wasted in wishful thinking instead of earnestly working. Those who ask God in prayer to do things for them without their cooperation are not working with God. Many people say that God's gifts are free. That is not true. No gifts of God are free. Whatever God gives you must be paid for by equal regiving. When you hear people say that God's gifts are as free as the air you breathe, they should be reminded that it requires an effort to breathe it in and must be re-given equally. Not even the life he gives you is free. You must re-give it to him. People often say that those who work for God should receive no payment for their services. Every man on earth continually works for God, whether he is aware of it or not. Every service rendered to any man should be re-given by that man. That is God's law. He who does not re-give is taking. It will avail him nothing. God will fulfill every desire of every man, insect, bird, animal, or any living thing, if he who asks immediately starts fulfilling that desire by his own actions, with full knowledge and belief that God has also started working with him to fulfill that desire in the orderliness prescribed by the creative process and the time element which is also prescribed. God will not stop these cruel wars, even though 10 million people ask him in prayers to stop them, unless the people who made them start stopping them with him. God will never do for man what man should do for himself, nor will he work for man while man works against his one law. When a man works against God, he hurts himself. He plunges his world into war by his own free will right. When he has hurt himself very disastrously, he prays to God to stop the wars he is making. That is the great error of not knowing God's ways and making them our ways. Even though 10 times 10 million pray to God to do for them what they should do for themselves, he will in no way work for them. God will fulfill the desire of all his creation, whether animal or planet, man or star. Not one thing is ever created without desire in itself to be created. All things in nature have no free will to work with God as he works with them. Man alone, who has free will because he has consciousness, asks God to do things for him without working with him. Children should know that they have free will to do anything they choose to do by working with God or against him, but that when they work with him, they find happiness, and that when they work against him, they make themselves suffer. Give them simple demonstrations of that fact at every opportunity. Show them that when they are watering a little plant and caring for its soil, God is making it grow. That is the way they are working with God by creating a plant with him. Then demonstrate that if they stop watering the plant or caring for its soil, the plant will die. That is working against God. Such demonstrations and teachings to children should be endless in all walks of life. If there is a great industrial plant in the neighborhood, they should be shown that it grew to its enormous size because someone desired it and started working with God to create it. It has been started by one man who had worked hard in a little place before he could employ thousands of men in a big place. Then show them a little sapling which becomes a mighty oak by working with God. The present generation very much lacks creative knowledge and desire for creative expression. It lacks demonstrations such as those indicated in the above paragraph. The trend of modern civilization and its teachings is causing far too many to expect public support as a right, instead of the opposite. Also, the glory of love and excelling in work is being lost by far too many who watch clocks with eagerness for closing time instead of regret that they cannot continue to give far more than is expected of them for sheer love of giving. These are teachings which will make a better civilization because they will make better men. These are the lessons of nature, only our teacher, which are of the greatest import for schools to teach. Instead of that, our schools think that the teachings of great import are the dates of battles, the names of characters and events such as who killed Julius Caesar, or the location of countries, cities, or rivers. Any man may be a great inventor, painter, or writer without any such information, but millions of children are bursting with such information who have no creative ability whatsoever. Or if they have ever had, it was crushed out of them by brain building instead of mind unfolding. One generation of teaching children to know their relation to nature would go farther in advancing the human race than thousands of years of building encyclopedic brains. Moreover, every child's schooling should end at not later than 14, preferably 10. After the age of 10, everything taught him should be way of demonstration. Memory tests should be entirely eliminated, beyond the necessity of sufficient repetitions to make mathematical tables and the alphabet automatic. Any educational extension after the maximum age of 14 should be limited to professional training in law, medicine, statesmanship, and the skills of the various arts and sciences. Every day spent in such training beyond the age of 20 may add to information, but at the cost of lessening creative power. The ability to create can be multiplied all of one's life if begun early in life, but if interfered with during youth by formal educating processes based upon memory tests, it may be stultified beyond recovery. I do not say this without vast evidence to support it. Practically every genius eliminated schooling from his life-born age of 14. Many pianists and violinists were famous before the age of 20, and well known as geniuses long before that. My husband and I have demonstrated this principle. He was a good painter, musician, and composer at 10, at which age he finished his schooling. At the age of 13, he was a church organist. At 13, he had won fame with honors from several European countries. During the last 50 years, he has multiplied these achievements by a long list in art and in science. I also have had practically no formal school education, which freed me for individual thinking and creative expression as a painter and philosopher who was not content with the world's unworkable philosophy. The knowledge which nature and communion with God taught me, you are now reading in this book. I feel certain that had I wasted my creative years in schools, this book would not have been possible, for the years of making brain recordings might have made it impossible to awaken my own inner light of mind illumining. If we are ever to have a culture civilized in which the immoral man is awakened, our educational policy, which now educates the senses of children, should be replaced with a system which awakens their immortality. at a very early age through teaching them how to think and know the treasures of the mind which are within all men. And we'll pick this up on another day.